Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another exciting event at SupTech Week 2024. This is a session intended to be very interactive, so we're looking for people to get involved. We will obviously provide lots of information to help get people thinking, but we're really excited for people to engage. This session is going to be on the African SupTech Accelerator. We're going to first, though, before we move into the workshop and the presentation, we're going to remind ourselves of the amazing work that the Cambridge SupTech Lab have done in terms of looking at the state of SupTech and really reflect on the state of SupTech from the perspective of the regulators. And then we're going to be looking in this session at how we might be able to encourage, catalyze more tools and digital tools in Africa that meet the needs of regulators where they are now. Juliet.
Hello, everybody. We've just come out of an excellent session, let me call it that, looking at how we can unlock tech potential for Africa. And in there, we're able to see data from the State of SupTech report in terms of how SupTech adoption is in sub-Saharan Africa. We still see, at least we are seeing a rise in terms of adoption, and we're at 60% reporting that they have SupTech solutions in place, and about 5% have 5 or more SupTech solutions already active. We are still lagging behind in terms of the technology that we use to support SupTech solutions. So we're still at what we call 1G, 2G, so looking at manual processes, maybe still at template-based data collection and manual validation or validation through Excel. But there is a lot of desire for 3G, 4G SupTech technology, such as automated validation. There was insights around moving towards predictive analytics, and also looking at AI, which is a surprise, at least in this year. And in our work with regulators in this region, we get this question, where do I begin, all the time. And it was refreshing to hear that most have started work on diagnostic assessment, so that they can just understand where they're at as an institution, and where their gaps are and where they have opportunities for SupTech. Challenges remain the same across the region. Issues around capacity building, needs for data analytics and data science. Funding is also a big challenge, but there is a lot of work around that. So in the panel session, they spoke about a lot of work in terms of collaboration. So we also had regional institutions as part of the panelists. So putting in a lot of collaborative efforts so that they can pull up some of the jurisdictions that are lagging behind, especially around capacity building. There is peer-to-peer learning forums and sessions that they're working on, so that they can learn from each other. We also had a few best practices, looking and shifting towards scalability of their solutions, and not just focusing on one solution or a solution sitting within a function or department, but seeing how they can scale within the institution and also within the region. We also heard about sort of, I want to call it modularity. So having SupTech solutions that are modular, and again, speaking, I guess, to scalability. So there's this look at SupTech cutting across institution and across jurisdictions. So all in all, I think it was a really good session that we had, and looking forward to getting insights from this session. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I mean, it was, I was looking at the results before this session. So really encouraging in terms of the interest and demand and engagement, and really wonderful to hear in the panel a lot of activity around bringing up capacity, sharing best practice, and also thinking about scalability. Because I think if we can think about scalability at the forefront, then really there's a huge opportunity, isn't there, for things to move incredibly quickly. And that's one of the things actually I think we've observed from the State of SupTech report, that there has been a huge shift really globally in terms of regulators moving from that experimentation to where we're seeing at the moment really the development of strategies, and that being a huge catalyst for not experimenting across a broad range of use cases. And I was really interested to see competition coming up there in the list of use cases for supervisory technology. So lots of really new interesting areas. Okay, fantastic. So we are going to walk you through a case for SupTech Accelerator in Africa. We've heard from Juliet Onwe already from the Cambridge SupTech Lab, talking to us about regulators and where they're at, and what they're looking for from SupTech in the future. So really helpful when we think about use cases later on today. We've got an amazing evidence base. I'm going to present to you for 20 minutes about what we've been thinking about, not just at the Gates Foundation, but also with our partners like the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance, those that are really working on trying to catalyse SupTech, thinking about what are the other gaps in the ecosystem and how we might fill that. So we'll be talking to you about the case for the SupTech Accelerator. What we're looking for after that are a series of breakout room activities and discussions where we're going to be engaging with you around what you think about the concept. We're going to present a model to you of how an accelerator may work in this very specific niche area of SupTech, and it needs to work in a very particular way, given that customers are the regulators, given that the topic is issues like financial consumer protection. And we're going to be looking at use cases where what we think the priority areas might be. Do we already have an idea of topics that we need to get moving on now? And then we will wrap up at the end of it with a readout. Hopefully, we will have lots of people that can. We can take a step back, myself and my colleagues at Intentional Futures, and we can rely on our colleagues to help us give us an insight into what we think the next steps might be. Okay, shall we move on with the okay, so we can go back to that slide before, actually, Hina, if that's okay. The introduction slide. Lovely, yeah, that one, perfect. Okay, so just to do a proper introduction, my name's Anna Wallace. I am the Senior Programme Officer for Consumer Protection and Regulatory Technologies at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And really what we're looking to do is build trust in digital financial services to ensure that the really transformative effect that the digital financial services have had on financial inclusion over the last decade are sustained and improved, in fact, over the coming decades. And one of the areas where we think we hope we can build trust is in the use of supervisory technology to identify and mitigate risks in digital financial services and to really empower and equip regulators to have timely insights and be able to take action where problems arise. So the case for accelerating, what we're looking to make today is a case for accelerating an innovation marketplace in Africa that is focused on empowering regulators and protecting consumers. Thanks. And what we're really envisioning for the future is a dynamic kind of innovation marketplace in Africa that's connecting innovators and the supply of innovative tools and solutions with the demands of regulators to help protect consumers and build that trust. And for us, we believe that protecting, financial consumer protection really is at the cornerstone of financial inclusion and a kind of trusted and sustainable financial inclusion, and that it underpins the economic resilience of economies. We know from COVID that economies that were able to rely on digital payments for the purposes of social protection were significantly more able and more resilient during that period than their counterparts who did not have access to these digital payments. So we know if we can make these digital payments trusted and used by consumers, that can support economic development and economic resilience. Thank you. But really, to make the case, what we need, we believe, is the support of regulators in the region. And that's why today is such an incredible opportunity. We think from the State of the SupTech report that there is lots of demand for SupTech. But we know from the research that the Cambridge SupTech Lab have done as well that there aren't many solutions and there aren't many companies that are actually developed in sub-Saharan Africa. So as part of the digital tools that the Cambridge SupTech Lab created in the very early days of inception, we looked at the various use cases for SupTech examples that have been developed with or by regulators, and we looked at the location of the companies, and we found a really big gap of companies that were based in or had emanated from sub-Saharan Africa. So really, what we're looking to achieve in this narrative, and this is going to be one of the big questions, we think a really powerful part of making the case for an innovation marketplace that is located in Africa is that the regulators who will be using it there's a clear demand emanating from those regulators, and so we believe it's the voice of those regulators that will be really powerful. Next slide. So why is it needed? I mean, I've said it a number of times already, but this is in the words of Cecilia, who is the head of the Biz Innovation Hub, which cuts across globally. It really is an essential tool. It's in SupTech innovation, and is it interesting to use the word innovation and safeguarding in the same sentence? But that's exactly what it is. SupTech is essential for safeguarding the financial system And central banks, supervisors, regulators in the private sector need to focus on this important task. And this quote from Cecilia came earlier on in the year when really she was giving a call to action to all regulators. I think she was become concerned at the lack of progress that regulators were making in their SupTech journey. And this is why the work of the Cambridge SupTech Lab is so incredibly important. I think the Biz Innovation Hub were concerned that regulators were stuck at this experimentation phase and that really SupTech wasn't being industrialized or being put into production by supervisors in their everyday tasks. And so it was kind of stuck in these innovation units and being done for the purposes of experimentation. And she was really making a call that this is, it's systemically important for the core functions of regulators that there is SupTech innovation and that it continues to grow. So that really is the top kind of call for action from the Bank of International Settlements. When I take a step back and think about it from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where really our focus is on poverty alleviation and financial inclusion, really the drivers for us in terms of SupTech innovation is that we have this huge expansion of digital financial services. We included 50% more people into formal financial services in a decade between 2011 and 2021. So there's a massive explosion of these services. The regulators that are trying to tackle it have a huge number of new consumers that are now engaging with digital financial services. So the sheer scope of it is one of the drivers. They bring new threats. The delivery of financial services through digital and mobile services brings new threats into the financial system and brings those threats directly to the consumer. And we all know the issues that we're going to talk about, the impact that fraud is having on consumers. And the real crux of it is if we don't get a handle on it, then trust will begin to diminish. And the huge welfare benefits that formal financial services can deliver for individuals will be undermined. And so it really is incredibly important, not just that we are able to tackle these risks and manage them and maintain the trust of consumers, but that we need to do it as quickly as possible. Thanks. Thanks, Hannah. Okay, so how does this play out for an individual? So we've been spending a lot of time with Aisha and thinking about what this means for her, because we can talk about financial services and SupTech at a very high level, but ultimately what we care about is the individual, because it's the trust of those individuals that really is crucial to the success of digital financial services. So we have Aisha, and like many individuals, she relies on mobile wallets for her financial services to get access to financial services. But she receives an alarming text. She tries to log in, not knowing that it's fraudulent. Her information is compromised, and the fraudsters drain her account. One of the concerns we have about fraud when it comes to financial inclusion is, the numbers may not look high on an aggregate level, but at an individual level, it really doesn't take a huge loss to have a really material impact on individuals. And so in this circumstance, Aisha needs to go without food, and as a result has a knock-on effect in her ability to pay for her rent. And we've said here, Aisha is upset, and I got feedback on Monday, and I think it was absolutely right. This isn't upset. This is devastating. This is the loss of your funds that you thought were protected by a financial institution. So it's a devastating impact on Aisha, and she has no recourse. And really, at that point, she opts out of the service and loses all trust with digital financial services. And deals in cash again. And I think the point we want to make with all of this is we can talk about financial education, we can talk about financial literacy, and these are incredibly important components of the trust and of consumer protection. But we also want to say, actually, there's a whole lot of activity going on in the background. There's a whole lot of players, organizations, processes, systems, and individuals that make up a trust ecosystem that really determines the outcomes for Aisha and whether she is protected or not. I have to go a bit bigger on this one, Hina. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So what's happening in the ecosystem when Aisha falls, prey to this fraudster? Well, the fraudsters are able to launch a multitude of fraud schemes. In fact, sadly, they may not have to do a multitude of them. They may be able to rely on just one kind of mode of fraud because, frankly, the trust ecosystem isn't able to spot it and to take action. The financial service providers have no incentives really and limited tools to address this fraud. There's not this, innovative marketplace that's looking at new and exciting ways to leverage AI to identify patterns in fraud that can help financial service providers potentially predict new areas. And so they really can't see when things go wrong. And really, as we know from the last slide about Aisha, Aisha's not complaining about the problem. So the risk and the impact of the fraud is actually lying with her and not with the financial service provider. So they don't have the incentives to take action. As I say, there's no demand from anyone for innovative solutions. So there's no marketplace looking to address the frauds or to monitor patterns of fraud. The regulators have got no access. They have no tools to understand whether there are patterns or to identify where the money is going, to prevent those money trails, to take the money back. So they are not able to respond quickly. In those kinds of circumstances, regulators tend to rely on fairly crude tools like the creation of new policies and regulations. We have this whole, exciting ecosystem of consumer advocates, trade associations, and government entities who who have powers and mandates and interests in terms of consumer protection and building trust, but they have no foresight and they have no tools available to them. And the justice to protect our rights as individuals, but also to take action against criminals, does not have the data or information to hold fraudsters accountable. And so in this ecosystem, in this trust ecosystem, fraud continues to increase and trust continues to fall. And really what we're saying is what's missing from this ecosystem is a marketplace right in the middle of it that can serve all of these players who could build a trust ecosystem and that could support more effective supervision and generate solutions to enhance oversight and data sharing. Thanks, Henna. Yeah, I'll move to the next slide, Henna. I think that's thanks. Oh, sorry, Henna, could you go back to the ecosystem slide, the positive one? Sorry, it's yeah, 2 slides along. Yeah, they're perfect. Okay. is really got some delays going on here. Where the fraudsters, look, the fraudsters may still be able to launch a new scheme. You know, they will continue to try to find ways around a trust ecosystem. Um, but in this new ecosystem, they will have to use that for a considerable period of time because the financial service providers are motivated and they're supported to address fraud and make consumers aware of it. There's innovative solutions constantly being developed that can adapt to the new types of frauds that are coming out. They're making it easier for providers, regulators, and other stakeholders to prevent and to spot these schemes. The whole new exciting consumer protection landscape in terms of regulators. We've data protection regulators, we've competition regulators, we've central banks, we've financial services regulators. So we're able to really, financial intelligence units as well. So they are able to collaborate and share data in a safe way to really spot and identify these issues. Then we also have consumer groups. Hina, we can't see the end of that slide. Thanks very much. We also have consumer groups, trade associations, and government entities who now have market level data and are able to keep consumers and providers informed and advocate for new stakeholders. So the trade associations, are working with their financial service providers to collect information about, modes of frauds. Consumer advocates are able to get information, on the ground from consumers who may not be, who may still not be complaining, who may not have fallen foul of schemes but have heard of them. Again, are able to use that data to identify and spot. And we have government agencies who are able to take action, who have oversight of telecoms, provide everyone support individuals and to really make it incredibly difficult for the fraudsters to operate. And obviously at the sharp end of that is the justice system, where they have the data, they have the information, they can find the individuals and they can hold them accountable. And really in this trust ecosystem where the players in that ecosystem have access to data and digital tools to help them share information, gain insights, we see fraud falling and trust growing in this ecosystem. Thanks. So I think I'll move on to I've taken a bit of time. So what I want to now talk about is the model of that. So why do we think a SupTech accelerator is the mode for really sparking this trust ecosystem? Why do we use the term accelerator? Well, in Africa, 49% of tech starts took part in an accelerator, and it's an incredibly important source of funding for these types of for these tech entities that we think are really going to new tech jobs in Africa over the course of only 1 year. Um,
And I think we lost you, so I'm gonna take over just to keep us going here. So Hi, everyone. My name is Hina Syed. I'm an associate director at Intentional Futures, working on this concept with Anna. And while we get her back on, I will continue introducing the model. So, as she was saying, the importance of tech startups in Africa was really telling, and the data shows just how many operated in 2023, and also how much of a need there is to think about staffing and what kind of staffing is going to need to fuel the kind of tech innovation that's going to need that we're just going to need in the future. And by using this model and understanding that context, we think that we would really be able to spark growth in supply and demand to meet local need, foster local tech talent and solutions, and build trust and relationships across the ecosystem by developing a SupTech accelerator for Africa that is developed with and not for. That's the big thing that we're doing here, which is why we are so excited to have this workshop and to hear from you, because where we're at now and what I'm about to show you is our idea for an accelerator model, but it is definitely not set in stone, and we want it to be molded. We want to understand what are the actual needs and how it can be shaped to fit those needs and to create a marketplace that is sustainable and effective, and most importantly, usable for folks like yourself. So with that, the core principles for the accelerator that we have in mind are that it's targeted, which means that it addresses the greatest needs of the African regulation ecosystem, with consumer impact at the forefront. And for us, that really is thinking about that trust ecosystem and how it operates and how we can make sure that it does the positive things for Aisha and not the negatives that we first were introduced. The second is that it's co-designed, which again is one of the reasons why we're here today, collaboratively built and integrated and supported by African uh, excuse me, by African stakeholders. And so as much feedback as you are willing and able to give today, we are very excited to hear, to really dive into that co-design process. And we've done a few of these discussions with some other stakeholders, but we've never had participants like yourselves, as many of you in a room. And so we're really curious to hear what you have to say. The third element is that it's inclusive, which means we're open to solutions across the spectrum. We're not pigeonholing into we want one specific thing, because again, we really want this to meet need and not just be what we think is great or what we want to invest in. We want this to be something that is comes up with solutions that can really make an impact. And then the last piece is that it's transformative, which means it's designed to build relationships and solutions that foster a local marketplace, and again can fuel that trust ecosystem and have a sustainable marketplace that doesn't just end in a couple years, but is self-sustaining. And just a quick check to see if we have Anna back. All right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Or you can hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear
you. Okay. Thank you very much, Hannah, for stepping in. You might want to just keep telling me if you can and can't hear me, in case my bandwidth goes again. So yeah, as you were saying, look, we really are, it is looking for a collaborative effort. And one of the things we want to show, because one of the issues we have with SupTech is obviously, it is a very niche area. But I think what we proved through this ecosystem is actually there's a lot, it's not just financial service regulators that need digital tools and access to data to help protect Aisha. And actually, particularly when it comes to something like mobile money, where there's a telecoms regulator, a financial services regulator, there's a whole ton of regulators that have a consumer protection mandate over her. So on the right-hand side with the beneficiaries, we really have broadened that scope. There's the trade associations. I mean, really even providers and telecoms companies could be in that beneficiary bucket for now. In terms of the accelerator itself, as Hina said, what we really, what we care about here is impact, that it works for the regulators and that it works for the trust of the consumers. And therefore, really, those that are going to be investing in something like this aren't going to be looking for a return on investment. They're going to be looking for an impact. And therefore, we really think that it's philanthropic capital, it's development bank capital, and impact investing is going to be the kind of capital that we need to really support the development of SupTech. And then for those that come up, in terms of the innovators, we think it can come from a range of places, academia, research partners, and startups. So there's a really broad section of players that we rely on, and a collaborative effort is necessary to enable this accelerator to work. Next slide. Yes, it's really looking to bridge the gap between the regulator and the innovator, but what kind of functions may it perform? Well, the first is we really want it to be a place where solutions can be co-designed. We think it's incredibly important that the regulator and the innovator work together to think about the problem statement and how technology can help build the trust and build this trust ecosystem. We really want it to have obviously an acceleration function where the innovators are able to receive those that have been selected, who have the idea and the capability to address that idea. They receive financial, technical, and other supports, mentoring, for example, to mature their solutions. But regulators, we think, also really need support because as I'm an ex-regulator, I used to work at the UK Financial Conduct Authority. Our public procurement processes can be very slow and really kind of focused on bringing technology in at scale. This is really trying to help regulators think about how they can experiment and play with new solutions. So really thinking about their own innovation architecture and how they can be more effective with working at solutions that are much more on the kind of the vanguard of technology. And then we have a matchmaking service as well, where innovators get support to help them really identify how to work effectively with government agencies. When I spoke about these procurement processes, they are essential, though. There is a reason they exist, and the reason they exist the way they do. And so we don't want the startups to think, hey, I just need to we want to increase the number of solutions in the market, and really mature those solutions, and also building the capacity within regulators to work with innovative technology. Thanks. Okay, so really that's the concept that we want to talk to you today about. At the moment, we're at co-design phase. We say in 2024 we're doing resource mobilization. That is most certainly moved it to next year, where we're really going to be talking to other organizations that have resources that can help build this and support it, whether they be technical resources, whether they be financial resources. We would really love to launch this next year as well. And by 2030, really have demonstrated that we've accelerated the SupTech solutions in sub-Saharan Africa, actively working with 2 to 3 regulators, and then 5 years after that, really looking to build on that success and begin to scale both the accelerator itself, but also the solutions that come through the accelerator. So this is a long project. This is not we'll go in for 2 years and we'll have sorted the SupTech space out. This is a long-term engagement to really shift the dial when it comes to SupTech supply in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so that is where we are at. Hina, shall I move it on to you to move us into groups to have the first workshop discussion?
Yes, I actually think we're gonna keep us all together to just have one big discussion
Okay, cool, perfect.
right
Good
now.
idea.
And hi everyone, we're excited to move in from the talking at you to the talking with you and the discussion portion of this workshop. And I just put a link into the chat of a Miro board where we will be operating in case you want to follow along and provide feedback directly. If you would like to do that, you can look for my name up here, right here in this corner, and click on myself, and then you'll be able to follow exactly where we're at. And then you can pick a Post-it note just like this, put it into a section, and write your thoughts. And you can do that as we go. You can do that as we're talking about a specific question. You're also welcome to come off of mute and to join us, and we'd love to hear your feedback, and then we will take notes. But what we're most curious right now and understanding is, from what Anna just presented, what resonates with you, what is missing, and then how can we encourage stakeholders to adopt this approach? And this can be about the model, it can be about the story that we told of why this is needed. We really want to hear your feedback on the entire concept of a SupTech accelerator for Africa. And if you have any questions on using the Miro, please put them in the chat, and myself or a colleague will jump in to answer you. But with that, I want to open it up to see if anyone has any initial thoughts, and you can just raise your hand and we can have you join us.
And maybe you could zoom into the Miro board just so you see what question we're on at the moment, Hina, as well.
Yes, we can start with what resonates. And again, it's about the argument for the accelerator, the trust ecosystem, Anisha's story, and the accelerator model. And Elia just flagged that if you click the raise hand button, that's how we'll be able to hear or to notice that you have something to share. We can also start with the what's missing or how we can encourage adoption of this approach. And with the adoption of the approach, we're specifically looking for what skepticisms or questions you might have about the accelerator's approach, or how to mitigate or overcome that skepticism.
Yeah, we're debating in the chat who we're going to call out first. Dion actually joined the call first, I noticed, from the Bank of Namibia. I don't know, whether you have any reflections on the presentation in general.
I see we have one person writing up their thoughts. In addition to what resonates or what is missing, also would be interested to hear if this is something that you've heard of being tried before in this market and it failed or is currently in operation. We'd love to know um, thoughts about that as well. So the challenges of the deterioration of trust is something that is resonating. Also, the attempts to find solutions of identified problems.
To the group that likes to think first. I like this.
Missing is the ecosystem of fraud attack chain.
Hmm.
I'm also just curious if in general people think that this would work, having an accelerator such as this. If the current all the stakeholders that need to be engaged in this, whether at at your country level or your regional level, would be willing to adopt something that came out of an accelerator. Some more notes coming in.
I'm curious about the note about the fraud attack chain in the entire ecosystem. I think, Rika, that was one of your notes. I'm wondering if you could say maybe a bit more about that and what pieces we might be missing. We'd love to capture that detail.
Is that Raisa? Hi.
Raisa, yes, apologies, got your name wrong.
Well, I don't know. I could be wrong as well.
So we have some more feedback on the model, considerations for technical standards and guidelines for solutions. Move that.
You know, that's a really important point, that one actually, of you know, an accelerator obviously could support companies, right? But it could also support the acceleration of tech by creating standards, and by creating standards with regulators that companies can use to instruct them on what good looks like, right? I think that is a really that could be a really important function of an accelerator.
I think we have someone joining us on stage.
Hi, can you hear me, Hina?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm sorry, I had difficulty enabling my voice and camera. Apologies for that.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks for that.
It worked on take 3, Anna. So, okay. Sorry. What was your question again, please, Hina?
Yeah, so I think we were curious to know a little bit more about what is missing in relation to the, I think it's the fraud ecosystem. Yeah, the ecosystem of the fraud attack chain, just so we can think about how we can build that out more, dive into that.
So here's my reasoning for the comment. Fraud normally does not happen in isolation. And it normally starts either on a telco platform through a message or a phone call, or it starts on a social media platform. So we need to think about how we include the regulators for those respective sectors, alongside financial regulators and supervisors. How do we bring them into that ecosystem, and how do we ensure that it is a collaborative and a collective effort to stop or to minimize fraud and in respect of fraud regulation. So it's really about bringing in cross-sector and cross-border regulators to talk to each other, to build trust in the ecosystem by reducing fraud, for example, in the example that was set out at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, and I think we could probably, Raisa, pull that out more in the example. That cross-border aspect, and really be quite specific with the where the fraud is starting. Any ideas, Raisa, on who's responsible for the social media platforms?
Well, I'm not in each country. I would assume that the social media platforms are regulated through different pieces of regulation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be an evaluation country by country. But for
Yeah.
example, in Australia, there was joint regulations. Sorry, Australia or Singapore? There was joint regulations issued by the telecom regulator as well as the financial services provider regulator,
Yeah.
where reimbursement for fraud, liability needs to be shared. So
Yeah.
we need to think about fraud reimbursement and liability
Yes.
sharing across the fraud attack chain in that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. And I think we have someone else who's joined us.
Am I free to talk?
Yes, please do.
Okay, it's Oluwashola Ajiwole, Central Bank of Nigeria. Well,
Welcome.
thank you. I didn't
Lovely
start.
to see you again.
Thank you. I didn't start with you, but along the line I joined. So an issue of fraud is coming up. I know in our society there are a lot of issues that lead to fraud. One of them is the education, that is awareness on the part of the consumers. Most of them, through social engineering, they release their vital information, their financial information that the fraudster, capitalize on. So in that situation, it will be difficult, to ask the banks to bear the liability. So the issues around social engineering need to be addressed. Then the consumer need to be aware, which we have been creating in Nigeria, be aware that don't release your vital information, your financial information, like your code, don't release your password, don't release to anyone. Your card, don't release to anyone. The information on them, don't release to anyone. But as in the bid of promoting financial inclusion, there was some attempt made to bring people to the financial system. This fraudster also, they capitalize on this to register one or two persons or minors, and they capitalize on them. So presently there are regulations, there are platforms that try to track the fraudsters. There are also two-factor, multi-factor that are put in place. But in most cases, people compromise their basic codes, and then this has also, helped the fraudster at times to get away with the money at the first time, but the second time the account is frozen or post no debit. So, but most times they get it the first time, and the knowledge help to build, a platform, for tracking fraudster. So it's still evolving, but the awareness is also improving. But we still have some people that used to compromise their code, and this one give the fraudster, a fast line, to defraud others. So that is what I will say for now. But finally, one of the suggestions I have is that SupTech will go a long way to help in mitigating issue of fraud. How can this be done? There are unique identity, unique unifier that if it is, placed on the SupTech, it can reveal the identity of the fraudster. But some of the fraudster, they hide this, they used to steal somebody else's identity and use it for the fraud and drop it immediately and disappear. But going forward with the use of SupTech in Africa, I think this will be resolved. Then the agencies that are involved in the financial system, when they collaborate, I think it also helps. Somebody has mentioned cross-border, which is very, very important. Then even within the country, the agencies are working together because there is what we call electronic fraud forum in Nigeria, where agencies, they work together, to make sure that they didn't go scot-free. So I will stop here. As we discuss again, I may still add some. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Wasola, for your thoughtful remarks. And it does remind me, it does make me think, it makes me think of a lot of things, but I think one of the things you pointed to actually is the capturing of fraud data and more granular picture of the frauds that are happening. With fraud reporting, if we can actually build a trust ecosystem, we may also see people reporting not just when they've lost money, need action from the system, but they may also report when they haven't lost money, because they know something's going to be done with that information, and it may help someone else who maybe isn't as experienced as they are. So there could be this virtuous cycle as well of not just trust leading to consumers engaging with the formal financial services themselves, which is obviously the incredible result we're looking for, but actually also wanting to contribute to that trust ecosystem as well. What information have I got that may help others? And we're very focused on fraud, but the misconduct of agents is another good example. That may also be intelligence that consumers could, whilst it's not, I'm not complaining, I'm not looking for redress, I'm not looking to engage with the dispute resolution mechanism, but I want to provide information to my fellow consumers that this agent is not acting in a way that's in your interest, is trying to overcharge you for certain services or not providing you with the right information about the financial product. So yeah, that almost kind of made me think that if you can build a trust ecosystem and the people understand that the action will be taken as a result of it, they may actually contribute more intelligence than we have at the moment just through simple complaints channels. Thank you.
And I think we have Pamela from Uganda, I believe, also on stage joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Good day, good evening, good morning. It's good afternoon for me. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think the Accelerator is a welcome intervention for Africa in terms of effectively implementing supervision technologies. I was trying to share on the Miro board, but I was struggling a little bit, so apologies for that. But I was basically just trying to say that I think it would be a great way to kind of ignite orderly collaboration, because on the continent we're still very slow in terms of sharing ideas and expertise. So a platform like this would be great for bringing together various regulators, innovators on the continent. I believe there's a lot of skill and talent on the continent, but maybe in terms of bringing people together, that's something that's still lacking. So an accelerator of this nature would be great in that respect. In terms of maybe considerations as we move forward, I'm hearing, I think trust network, yes, trust, part of trust, at least for what we've seen in our jurisdiction, is cost at a sort of like economic level, but also for consumer level. Economic level being that if we're building what would essentially be different forms of digital public infrastructure, we want to assure the public that these are going to be cost effective and will not be a burden on the country as a whole, but also for the consumer, for them to know that, there's sometimes the belief that innovation is going to, hike the cost of financial services. So as I'm participating or seeing my financial authorities innovating and digitalizing the systems and encouraging innovation in the industry, they're also putting in place mechanisms and laws and frameworks to keep costs down or drive them lower. Yeah, that's just my submission. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela. And if others are having problems with Miro, please let us know, and we can either now or after make sure that we can reach out to you and find ways to capture all your comments. Yeah, cost is a really good point. It was a big driver for the regtech and SupTech movement in the UK, and I think a lot of other countries. Really the drivers for regtech and SupTech came from post financial crisis, huge amount of new financial regulation lands on industry within 5 years after the financial crisis. Those costs are really beginning to hit the banks and other financial institutions, and it creates a real backlash, a political backlash. And so the use of technology was really there to say, look, can we find a way, and the call obviously comes, right, Pamela, for deregulation. This is too costly. It's costing the country too much. It means that the cost of the products are too much. And so regtech was seen as a way of really maintaining those standards, because those standards were important because of the lessons we'd learned from the financial crisis. But technology would help us be more effective and efficient in meeting those standards. And so I think you're going beyond that and saying it's not, yes, we want it to be cost effective, but and we don't want it to be a burden, but we also need to, there needs to be assurances on that. And so I almost think, I'm thinking out loud here, Hina, that one of the principles, there's design principles that we have, where we have, it needs to be inclusive. And I think there needs to be a statement around cost. Yeah, I think that's a really cool suggestion. Thank you, Pamela.
Yeah, I agree. Adding in cost is something that hasn't been brought up a ton in our feedback session. So I really appreciate you bringing in that perspective and elevating it. And I agree that it should be incorporated upfront in how we're talking about the accelerator and those solutions, given how important it is to being that self-sustaining component. So appreciate that feedback. I'm not sure who wrote this, but I really like this comment about what is missing from the model. That being how collaborative each stakeholder would need to be in order to make this trust ecosystem work. And I'm curious if whoever wrote this had a perspective, or if anyone else has a perspective on what type of collaboration is needed from the different actors across the trust ecosystem. Do we need to have regulators very involved, or is it really the government officials that need to be the most collaborative? Just what kind of asks do we need to have of our stakeholders?
Yeah, whoever made that comment, I would love to hear from you, because it made me smile, because people can say, oh yeah, that would involve we're going to need, there's almost a charter that people may need to sign up. Engagement you're going to get, what kind of, is there an expectation they attend meetings? Is there an expectation they engage in tech sprints, that they contribute ideas, that they are involved in decision making? collaboration. We really want people to contribute to it, don't we? Yeah, that made me smile.
And if whoever made the comment doesn't want to elaborate by raising their hand, we'd love for you to add another sticky note for more context, because again, it is such a interesting and good point. So we wanted to raise that. Are there any other thoughts, reflections on what resonates, missing, or how we can think about how we should be thinking about skepticism related to this topic? Ellie is calling some folks out in the chat based off of your experiences. If you're willing to share, we would love to hear from you. Even if it's not on the accelerator, but just on your past experience, that would also be beneficial.
Or maybe we could just remind people how to contribute actually, Hannah, because we've got some new people in the group. Just because I know people are struggling with where messages are and what, but if you could just give people a bit of a summary of how they can come on the stage or message us or engage with the Miro, that would be great. Thanks.
So for those of you who are just joining, we are talking about what resonates and what is missing from a concept of an African SupTech accelerator. We're also curious to know more about what kind of skepticisms may exist and how to mitigate them in relation to a SupTech accelerator for Africa. And we've been using this Miro that I just pasted into the chat here. The first half of it outlines the model and our argument as for why this is needed. And that's what we walked through at the beginning of this call. And now we're on activity 1. You can provide feedback by clicking on one of these stickies here, and then writing your notes and then putting it wherever you think is best based off of your feedback. Or you can raise your hand and come join us in discussion, and then we will take notes. So if you're having any issues with Miro, you don't have to worry about that. Just raise your hand and we will take the notes for you, and would love to get your thoughts that way.
Thanks, Hannah. And we've had colleagues from the Linux Foundation and the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Bank of Uganda contribute already and come on the stage. So you don't need to put your camera on. You can just give voice to the questions or comments or concerns that you have. Thanks. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to move on to the next discussion topic. But obviously, people are still very welcome to continue to contribute to the Miro board on the first set of questions.
Yeah, and I also see that some folks have already moved ahead, which is great. Love that. And you can continue doing that. You have the link to the Miro. Please move through it as you see fit as we're talking, and add in comments wherever you have them. But I think we're going to go to the use case discussion, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jen to lead us through that. And I think this is a great session for some of you who may have just joined and who weren't here for the first half of it, being able to hear from you based off of your experience, just in general. So over to you, Jen.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. And thanks everyone who's contributed so far. It's great to see folks active in the Miro. So for this one, similarly, you'll have the opportunity to contribute. You can click on the Miro link and go in and add your own notes. If that's not working for you, or if you'd rather speak live, just use the raise your hand function in here to join the queue, and we'll invite you to share what you have to say with the group. So for use cases, what we're looking to do for this accelerator on SupTech in Africa is to look at where we have use cases that appeal to regulators, ones that have innovators that may already have solutions that could be scaled, and then ones that may appeal to funders as well. We'd love to find ones that kind of those unicorns that speak to all three, but that's certainly like not fully required. Just hoping to see if there are any. But I think given we've got a wonderful group of folks involved in financial regulation in this session right now, we would love to hear from y'all on what use cases for SupTech really appeal to you all. What are your highest needs, and where are there use cases that this accelerator might explore that would be relevant to both the challenges as well as opportunities that you all are facing as regulators? So I will leave it at that. If folks want to add sticky notes to let us know about use cases that are of interest to you, or just some of even the needs that you're facing. They might not even have SupTech solutions yet, but some of the greatest needs you all are experiencing as regulators, that would be really helpful. And if you'd like to speak up, please hit the raise your hand icon. It might take, as we heard from Pamela earlier, it might take a few tries of trying to raise your hand for the system to let us know. But yes, please do.
And given what we learned in the last session about how SupTech is currently being deployed versus how it's desired to be used in the future, I think even hypothetical use cases would be really helpful for us to know as we think about how to design those solutions and create criteria for solutions that would enter into the accelerator, or make the case of why this is really needing and what's missing from the market.
Wonderful. Already see one on here around.
Interested as well.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was interested as well in Juliet. I mean, I know Juliet's been running workshops and panels for goodness knows how long today and probably all week. I think everyone from the SupTech Lab has been working all global hours. But, you know, Juliet, when we looked at the survey results in terms of where the regulators currently are in terms of the types of technology they're using, you know, they're currently at more of a 1G, 2G state, but want to be at a 3G, 4G state in terms of beginning to use, analytics, predictive tools. Do you think the SupTech Accelerator, do you think the SupTech Accelerator should be more focused on that 2G, or do you think it should be reaching more for the 3G, 4G, or do you think it should cut across all of the various levels of maturity of SupTech tools? Thanks.
I think it should be focusing on 3G, 4G. So with our work, especially in this region, the request has been on, I want to say 2-3 use cases, a lot on sentiment analysis. In fact, all that I've worked with have mentioned sentiment analysis. The second is the social media monitoring, and then web scraping. So a lot on this sort of textual and structured data analytics has been the top request. The biggest challenge is the skills. They don't have the skills within the institution, because the models require a lot of data and training of the models. So for me, I would want the accelerator to invest more in 3G, 4G, because that's where the desire is, and second, that's where the biggest gap is for them. So I think that's where would have the biggest impact.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Juliet. Yeah, it's yeah, there's a lot of unstructured data in consumer protection, right? And so
So they've been collecting
those kinds of tools can be used in all sorts of different ways. As you say, the sentiment analysis, from web scraping information from websites. I've been trying to train a model on identifying the fairness of terms and conditions, and yeah, let me tell you, it's you need a lot of technical capability to do that. Me playing on ChatGPT apparently is not sufficient. So
yes, so they have a lot of data, but the next level is more tracking in terms of resolution of the complaints. And I was really happy to hear Khadija from a Bank of Tanzania speaking on they have moved to looking at every complaint as a diagnostic. So not necessarily just tracking to ensure there's resolution or track to see whether it was resolved, but each complaint is taken as an insight either to inform policy or to inform the level of the internal policy, say if it's on a particular SFI or in general in terms of their jurisdiction. So going beyond just managing complaints and resolution, but now getting insights from the data is where the biggest gap is.
Thanks for sharing that. I think Oluwasola has joined us on the stage. Feel free to share.
Thank you for the opportunity once again. Juliet, thank you also. It is interesting to know that in our jurisdiction, we still have some at the 1G, still have some on 2 and 3, depend on the problem at hand, and then sophistication of of the users or the developer. Juliet has mentioned the major challenge in Africa, and especially in Nigeria. The issue of data is still we still have a challenge as related to data, because if you want to go from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, your data must be very clean and of good quality. This has been problem in our jurisdiction, which is still being worked on. Then issue of skill, having data engineer, data scientists, analytics, even innovators, it's still an issue in Africa. You see that most of these skills are moving to Europe, some are moving to America, and it's a problem in this subsector. Then issue of resources, that is funding. These 3 challenges put together are trying to mitigate, trying to hinder the development of this generation. But I want us to know that in Central Bank of Nigeria, we have regulatory sandbox. There are some sector of the economy where the central bank can pull data directly from the banks. And I see other subsector like other financial institutions like microfinance, they still push and pull. They are not in the same generation. Pull is in 3, while push is in 2. So these are been other issues that we're facing here. So depend on the problem at stake, and that depend on the type of banks you are dealing with, financial institutions that you are dealing with. Some of them are sophisticated, like commercial banks. They are sophisticated, their technology is robust. They are into cloud already, but there are some institutions, they are not yet there. Some still submit document through emails, some still submit document through, hard copy. Of recent, in the in other financial institutions supervision, other financial institutions subsector, there was a development of what you call paperless, paperless application, where initially you used to submit hard copy, but now it is done online, and then it is pushed to the regulator or the supervisor for processing. Like annual accounts, appointment of directors. These were done through this paperless, which we are still working on. You see, it's already deployed, but there is still room for improvement. In our consumer protection department, we have a consumer complaint management system also that captures the complaints of consumers, and inside that model, there are some other departments you need information from, which you still need to send email. Going forward, this will become automated. But I just want us to know that as for Nigeria today, you still find element of 1, 2, and 3. Not fully in 3, not fully out of 1, and also not fully in 2, because of the peculiarity of those institutions that are concerned, and then issue of data, issue of skill, and issue of resources. So we are still moving on, but I believe that the future of SupTech in Africa is bright if we continue this way. But we need to do a lot of collaboration. We need to, collaborate with other countries that are advanced, so that we can learn from them and then adopt it and localize that knowledge to meet our needs. But I think we still move between 1 to 3, as far as I'm concerned, in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, I know we're capturing notes as folks speak too on the board. So if anyone else wants to raise their hand, please feel free. In the meantime, it looks like we've had some great contributions come in, and we've got quite a few notes in the use cases for regulators. And we've captured a lot around data and the challenges there. And it looks like folks have added a few use cases to areas that appeal to all three folks. A few of these look familiar from the presentation earlier today. I see financial crime detection and prevention on there. And we've got privacy enhancing technologies and solutions that drive operational efficiency.
Yeah, and we didn't quite pick it up from the earlier session, but I was just looking at the Miro board, Jen. One of the comments, someone, I think they put it in as a question of, are we going to create digital public goods? What will that look like? And I think that's a really important question and a great opportunity for an accelerator focused on impact, is to consider whether there are foundational, if I think about use cases and what might we go into first, are there foundational digital public goods that this accelerator could produce that could help either produce a particular solution or could help the collaborative efforts in the first instance. So yeah, the ability of a platform to help regulators engage and think about solutions and identify to be able to interrogate those solutions. I could see that being something that could help both the regulators and the innovators, right? Because for the innovators, having to go and test a product with a whole range of regulators requires a lot of runway and cost. And those regulators often have to, think about their own specifications, whereas if a group of regulators came up with the parameters of a solution, and that solution provider could deliver, maybe it's not in a real environment, maybe it's in a digital environment, then that could potentially be a digital public good that could support and accelerate the solution, and also help that co-creation side of things as well. So yeah, that one very small question sparked off a lot of ideas in terms of an early use case for something that the accelerator could do. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing that, Anna. I'm curious if folks have reactions on that piece about DPGs at all. Meanwhile, I'm seeing some more notes about a consumer complaints management system. It's currently doing manual handling of complaints, needs to be scaled. It looks like folks are also sharing that funders, public and private, may be interested in data process automation, as well as integration. Any other thoughts from folks on some of the highest needs and use cases for regulators in Africa? Again, you can add sticky notes to the board, or if you're having trouble with that or would prefer to speak up, just hit the raise your hand button.
If you do think about any use cases, feel free to raise your hand and jump back into the conversation, or keep adding them to the Miro board. I do want to spend some time on our last activity here, which is talking about the accelerator design. And I think the question that I'm most curious about to hear from you all, given where you sit, and it's okay if you weren't a part of the first half of this presentation, because I think just your perspective in general would be really helpful here, is what do regulators need to see in order to adopt a SupTech solution? So that could be, what kind of criteria does it need to have? What kind of reliability do you need to see? What kind of stakeholders need to be involved in its development? Is it about, as someone just mentioned earlier, taking what's worked in a different context and then being able to localize it to your context? I'm really curious to know, like, what would drive adoption of a SupTech solution? I see someone has added relevance as something that would be needed, something that streamlines processes, which I think definitely connects to the use cases that got brought up, ease of adoption within existing systems, and reduce regulatory arbitration, so improve regulatory alignment. So again, to that, a bit of the processes piece. Any other thoughts about what it would take to adopt a SupTech solution? Love seeing some people add into the Miro here. And as you think about that, if anyone has a thought about focusing what kind of area in Africa this should focus, if it should have a regional focus or a country focus, again, would love to hear perspectives. And if you know of anything that currently exists that's trying to do a similar thing in one particular market, that would be great. I love whoever just called out the potential for cross-border fraud identification. That's a really compelling argument in terms of a regional focus. Are there any cons to having a regional focus, I wonder?
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, actually, in the in-person SupTech week here in New York. You know, that the regional, you know, if we think about, because we've got these, when we're thinking about the benefits and costs, right, or opportunities and risks, we thinking about them from the perspective of the innovators, from the perspective of the beneficiaries, but also thinking about them from the perspective of those that will be, you know, investing and supporting, providing resources. You know, there is a lot of organization around that finance side that is regional. It's both kind of marshaled at a regional level, but also it means that the resources can often be significantly more resources can be released as well. So it certainly feels that from that resource mobilization place, that this regional play may be significantly easier. You know, whether regulators organize themselves in that way and whether innovators think about themselves in that way, I think is an interesting question.
Yeah, and someone added in a con for the regional focus is
Oh, really?
sometimes the behemoth of the region can dominate. So if you have a strong country, they're the loudest voice in the room, which is something to
Yeah.
consider. And if they're large, they might have more capacity and resources than others in their region, which doesn't really make it transferable potentially.
Yeah, and often these regional approaches, particularly as an ex regulator who's worked on harmonization of rules in a European context, you know, they are inherently bureaucratic as well, because you know you need a higher level of robustness in terms of decision making and collaboration. And you know, one of the questions we have I mean, we've not spoken about this tension, but it's come up a lot in our conversation, which is scale versus pace. You know, are we trying to get, you know, use cases into the market to prove the case for this accelerator quickly, or are we trying to start with something that's got longevity? It's probably not one or the other. It's probably somewhere in the middle, of course, Hina. But it feels like potentially that regional question comes into that pace versus scale type of conversation.
Yeah, and I think people are adding comments also about political will, which gets into that of if you have the political will, pace can get much quicker, and scale as well. We also have
And
some
just as a reminder of that political will, sorry, and just before I forget, that point on political will takes us right back to that question of, does the narrative resonate? Because ultimately that's one of the goals of what we're trying to do. We need to get political will. We got a whole bunch of technocrats that love this stuff, right? A bunch of people who love SupTech, who love consumer protection, who are, who really see the value in this. We need to get, and this is what I was talking about yesterday. I did a keynote on digital consumer protection in New York for the SupTech Week. We need a much broader community to support this. We need the SDG community. We need the macroeconomic, ministries of finance community. We need, women's economic empowerment community, because we think it really provides value to all of these agendas, but they don't know much about the niche topic of SupTech. So is how we're talking about that going to get the kind of political will that you think is important as a regulator in your country? It's a really, really big question. I think that we may not have called it, but that's what we mean when we say, does it resonate?
Does anyone have any thoughts about what kind of political will is needed for your country or region?
Sorry, I interrupted you, Hannah, though. You were about to say something very important, I'm sure, and I cut you off.
No, I think that question is an interesting one. If anyone has feedback, to drop in the chat, raise your hand, or put in the Miro somewhere. Well, if it comes to you, feel free to share it. I think we have about 15 minutes left of our scheduled time. So if you have any final thoughts about anything that we discussed across the accelerator, from what resonates or what's missing from the model, to overcoming skepticism, to use cases, to how we should think about setting this up and the design of it, please feel free to either drop it in the chat here or raise your hand. And then I think we'll kind of wrap up to kind of sharing the next steps for this vision and go from there. So any final thoughts from anyone? Looks like we have another someone back on stage. Feel free to just start talking when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to appreciate Cambridge SupTech Lab for what they are doing to advance knowledge as regards SupTech. And now they can make, processes, financial processes seamless and easy, also trying to fight fraud and to combat, cyber risk, and also to protect consumers. I appreciate Cambridge SupTech Lab, but just as Oliver Twist, Africa, we are a bit behind in this process, though we are improving. But I want to, encourage Cambridge SupTech Lab to extend more of educational opportunity, training opportunity to the supervisor in Africa. If there is a way we can form, a platform, that platform of alumni, or a platform of one teach one, so that Africa can be more knowledgeable. And then, because the problem of skill is a challenge in Africa, skill, and one of the ways of addressing it is training, continuous training, So I want to encourage or appeal that this gesture should continue, to West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, so that when the knowledge pervades Africa, when the knowledge is here, I think issue of data cleansing, issue of resources, funding, will be resolved. But the skill is highly needed. So please, I want to encourage that it should be exposed more so that this knowledge can cut across. Thank you.
Thank you, Oluwasola. And I think that is a really good point, that this accelerator won't operate in isolation. There's a phenomenal amount of partners and activities happening that all support this trust ecosystem. And actually, there are, and the Cambridge SupTech Lab not only has obviously been doing this amazing benchmarking work to really understand and create an evidence base around the needs of regulators, but also to provide capacity building to regulators. And I think that capacity building to regulators is a big part for this increased awareness and demand for it. The SupTech Lab have also, as I said, developed digital tools, which I think will be incredibly helpful for this accelerator. So I think one of we've had this feedback a few times actually, is really understanding how this accelerator would work within a broader ecosystem of players that are really looking to support and catalyze the development of SupTech in Africa. So I think that's a wonderful point made, Oluwasola, and I think Juliet and the team will be very glad to hear that there's lots more demand for them. Okay. Hina, do you want to come in now, or
Yeah.
just say a few words? It'd be lovely to hear from Intentional Futures, because I think first of all, just want to say thank you to Intentional Futures, who have put a lot of time and resources and creativity into thinking about how to engage and capture people's ideas. And so these Miro boards are a really incredible way for us to engage with a much broader group, particularly groups who are only hearing this concept for the first time. So maybe it would be great to hear, Hina, you and the team's reflections on what we've got out of the Miro board today, and next steps. And obviously I can finish after that. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to just thank everyone for attending. And even if you weren't able to participate actively today, one of the good things about a Miro board is it stays live. And so if anything comes to mind over the next couple of days, please do feel free to add it in any way that you are comfortable with, whether it's adding a comment or a sticky note. Just drop it in, or you can reach out to us via email. We'd love to continue hearing from you. The biggest thing for us is this is not a closed discussion. That co-design and inclusivity piece is really important as we think about the accelerator and developing this model. So we want to continue these conversations as we move towards the next step of refining the presentation and the concept, and making sure that we get the why this is needed and what this should look like, right? And start taking it around to other stakeholders who can really help make this happen. So I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from this discussion is really thinking about what we mean to say in our presentation, but we aren't as explicit about it as we need to be, such as political will and the collaboration piece and how instrumental that is to the trust ecosystem and shifting the from to of hindering innovation to leveraging innovation. So again, thank you for those who called that out and who helped us see that so that we can strengthen that piece and be more explicit about what we want to happen, because I think making this as actionable as possible and as detailed with those actions as possible is one of the best ways to make it sustainable and to make it a useful entity for the future. So I think those are some of my key reflections, and looking forward to kind of diving into all of your notes and reading them in detail and being able to pull that out and thinking about what insights we can pull out as we move forward with this concept. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel really from today, as well as your reflections of let's just like call it as it is and ask for exactly what we want, like political will. I think mapping this out across a broader ecosystem of players, talking about the kind of digital public goods. When we think about impact, we do have this we have this impact that we want to have on the market and on trust ultimately, but we have in terms of quick wins, I think some assets that we can put out into the ecosystem that anyone can benefit from, whether they're in the accelerator or not. I think would be a really I think that could speak to a lot of potential investors in this, but also to benefit the innovation ecosystem and also for regulators as well. And I really, as I said earlier, love the collaboration. What exactly is it we're asking for in terms of collaboration? What kind of commitment do we need and why? And I think that really kind of, as you say, sharpening that will be incredibly useful. But I also think today it's taken us a step further as well. It's taken us a step beyond, where we now have some really good use cases and examples. A big thanks to Juliet on that and the presentation she did earlier this morning in terms of where we might go and why. And so I really think we've moved that really practical piece of saying, so what kind of things could we accelerate? I almost think we could put that into the presentation now, and how that specific use case might help with Aisha's story. So yeah, a big thank you to everyone. In terms of next steps, we're going to be doing a lot more work engaging on this topic over the course of next year. We kicked this off today in a virtual way. Next year, it's going to be all very real and in person. So definitely in a kind of workshop environment in person, somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa, where we can really dig deep into this, and not just dig deep into the concept, but really identify how we're gonna make this happen and bring it to life. So yeah, that just leaves me to say thanks to everyone for engaging, and a big thank you to the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance SupTech lab for putting together a conference where we're able to engage with this community, and to the World Economic Forum for also supporting bringing it to life as well. So thank you everyone, and a big thank you to Intentional Futures, Mira, Jen and Hina, for providing the Miro board and really putting together the kind of questions to help marshal this conversation and discussion. And have a great day, everybody. Well, whatever you've got left of it. The Intentional Futures team are all in Seattle, so they have got a whole lot of a day left in front of them. They were all up at 4 a.m. to help with this session. So yeah, a double thank you. But yeah, everyone, have a good day and thank you very much, and enjoy the holidays when they arrive. Thanks very much.
Thank you.